In 1960, Detroit, Michigan had the highest per capita income of any major city in the entire United States. Families bought homes. Workers retired with pensions. The American dream wasn't just alive in Detroit, it was born there. 50 years later, you could buy a house in that same city for $1 single. $1. How does the richest city in America become a place where homes sell for less than a cup of coffee? How does a metropolis that once held nearly 2 million people lose more than half its population in a single generation? And what dark forces, hidden decisions, and catastrophic mistakes turned the Motor City into a ghost town? This is not just a story about cars. This is a story about greed, about race, about power, and about what happens when an entire nation turns its back on the very people who built it. Before we continue, less than 5% of viewers are subscribed. If you believe in history hidden secrets, hit that subscribe button right now. Let's go back to the beginning, long before the first automobile ever rolled off an assembly line. The year is 1701, rebuilt from ashes. It served as a stop on the Underground Railroad, helping enslaved people escape to freedom in Canada, just across the river. But nothing could prepare this small Midwestern city for what was coming. In the late 1800s, something was happening in workshops and garages across America. Inventors were tinkering with machines, engines, wheels, the idea of a horseless carriage. Most people laughed at these contraptions. They called them toys for rich men, dangerous experiments that would never replace the horse. But a young man in Detroit saw something different. His name was Henry Ford, and he was about to change the world. Ford didn't invent the automobile. That's a common misconception. What Ford invented was something far more powerful. He invented a way to build automobiles that ordinary people could actually afford. In 1908, Ford introduced the Model T. It was simple. It was reliable. And thanks to Ford's revolutionary assembly line, it was cheap. While other cars cost thousands of dollars, the Model T sold for around $800. Within a few years, that price dropped even lower. Suddenly, the automobile wasn't just for millionaires. Farmers could buy them, teachers could buy them, factory workers could buy them. The Model T didn't just change transportation, it changed American society forever. And Detroit was ground zero. Word spread quickly. Ford was hiring. The pay was incredible. In 1914, Ford announced something that shocked the business world. He would pay his workers $5 a day. That was more than double what most factory workers earned anywhere else in the country. $5 a day. It doesn't sound like much now, but adjusted for inflation, that's over $150 in today's money, per day, for factory work. People came running. They came from the farmlands of Ohio and Indiana. They came from the mountains of Kentucky and West Virginia. They came from the Deep South, where Black Americans faced brutal segregation and limited opportunities. They came from Poland, Italy, Germany, and dozens of other countries. Detroit's population exploded. In 1900, the city had about 285,000 people. By 1920, that number had tripled to nearly 1 million. By 1950, Detroit held over 1.8 million residents, making it the 5th largest city in America. And the money was flowing. Ford wasn't alone anymore. General Motors rose to power. Chrysler joined the competition. The big three automakers dominated global manufacturing. Detroit became synonymous with industry, innovation, and the American dream. The city built grand theaters, towering skyscrapers, beautiful parks. Families bought homes in neat neighborhoods. Children went to well-funded schools. Unions fought for worker rights and won. A factory job could support a family, buy a house, and send kids to college. This was the golden age, the peak, the moment when Detroit stood on top of the world. But something was already going wrong beneath the surface. You see, Detroit was built on a single industry. When automobiles were booming, everything was wonderful. But what happens when a city puts all its eggs in one basket? The cracks started showing after World War II. Here's something most people don't talk about. During the war, Detroit's factories stopped making cars. They made tanks, bombers, jeeps, military equipment. The city earned a nickname, the Arsenal of Democracy. Detroit helped win the war. But after the soldiers came home, things started changing. The federal government began building highways, lots of highways. These new roads made it easy for people to live far from the city center and drive to work. Suddenly, you didn't need to live in Detroit to work in Detroit. Suburbs started growing. Places like Dearborn, Warren, Sterling Heights. Nice houses with big yards. Good schools. And something else that nobody talked about openly, but everyone understood. These suburbs were white. Detroit's black population had grown enormously during the Great Migration. Hundreds of thousands of African Americans had moved north seeking factory, jobs, and escape from Jim Crow laws. By 1950, black residents made up about 16% of Detroit's population. But they weren't welcome everywhere. Redlining, you may have heard this term. Banks and real estate companies drew literal red lines on maps around black neighborhoods. If you lived inside those lines, you couldn't get a mortgage. You couldn't buy a home in certain areas. You were trapped. White families moved to the suburbs. They took their tax dollars with them. They took their businesses with them, and they left behind a city that was slowly being drained of resources. Then came 1967, July. Summer heat. A police raid on an unlicensed bar in a black neighborhood. Tensions that had been building for decades finally exploded. What followed was one of the deadliest and most destructive civil disturbances in American history. 5 days of chaos. Fires that consumed entire city blocks. Over 40 people killed. Thousands arrested. Entire neighborhoods destroyed. The National Guard patrolling American streets like it was a war zone. Because in many ways, it was. After the smoke cleared, Detroit was never the same. White flight accelerated dramatically. Families who had been considering moving to the suburbs now fled as fast as they could. Property values collapsed. Businesses closed or relocated. The tax base shrank. And then the automakers delivered the final blow. By the 1970s, competition from overseas was crushing American car companies. Japanese and German manufacturers were making smaller, more fuel-efficient vehicles. American cars were big, heavy gas guzzlers. When the oil crisis hit, consumers changed their buying habits almost overnight. The big three started laying people off. Factories that had employed tens of thousands went silent. Assembly lines stopped moving. The heart of Detroit stopped beating. Think about this for a moment. In 1950, General Motors alone employed over 200,000 people in the Detroit area. By 2009, that number had fallen to barely 20,000. 90% of those jobs were gone. Where did those workers go? What happened to their families, their neighborhoods, their dreams? They left. They had no choice. Detroit's population dropped from 1.8 million to under 700,000. Block after block of houses stood empty, schools closed by the dozens. Entire neighborhoods were abandoned. Nature started reclaiming the land. Trees grew through living room floors. Deer wandered down city streets. In 2013, Detroit became the largest American city to ever file for bankruptcy. The city owed between $18 and $20 billion. There was no money for police, no money for firefighters. Streetlights went dark. Emergency response times stretched to nearly an hour. The city that built America's cars couldn't even keep its lights on. How did this happen? Was it bad luck? Bad decisions? Or something more deliberate? Some historians argue that Detroit was abandoned intentionally, that powerful interests saw more profit in suburbs and overseas manufacturing, that racial prejudice drove policies that strangled the city, that federal highway programs and housing policies were designed to benefit white suburbs at the expense of urban centers. Others point to corruption. Detroit had a string of mayors who made terrible decisions. Some went to prison. Mismanagement drained resources and drove away investment. The truth is probably somewhere in between. No single cause killed Detroit. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Each decision seemed small at the time. Each policy seemed reasonable to someone. But together, they formed a perfect storm of destruction. So where is Detroit today? This is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Detroit is not dead. Not even close. In the years since bankruptcy, something remarkable has started happening. Entrepreneurs have moved in, attracted by cheap real estate and a city hungry for renewal. Young people have discovered that Detroit offers opportunities that expensive coastal cities can't match. New businesses are opening, restaurants, tech startups, art galleries. Urban farms have sprung up on vacant lots, turning blight into fresh produce. The downtown area has seen billions in investment. Buildings that stood empty for decades are being renovated into apartments and offices. Is it a full recovery? No, not yet. Maybe not for generations. Hundreds of thousands of residents still struggle with poverty. Schools still need massive investment. Crime remains a serious problem. The scars of the past don't heal overnight. But there is hope. Real hope. For the first time in decades, more people are moving into Detroit than leaving. The city that rose on the promise of the American dream fell into nightmare and is now slowly, painfully fighting its way back. What does Detroit teach us? What lessons can we take from this tragic, inspiring, complicated story? Maybe this: that nothing lasts forever, that prosperity built on a single industry is fragile, that racism and segregation don't just hurt the people being discriminated against, they ultimately hurt everyone, that cities, like people, can fall hard, but they can also get back up. Detroit was never just a city. It was a symbol of American manufacturing, of worker prosperity, of the promise that hard work leads to a good life. When Detroit fell, part of that promise fell with it, and the question now is whether America can rebuild that promise. Not just in Detroit, everywhere. Because what happened to Detroit could happen anywhere. The forces that destroyed this city, the greed, the short-term thinking, the abandonment of working people, those forces didn't die. They're still out there. Detroit's story isn't over. It's still being written, and maybe, just maybe, the next chapter will be the beginning of something new, something better. What do you think caused Detroit's downfall? Was it inevitable, or could different choices have saved the city? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. History has secrets, and sometimes those secrets explain everything about the world we live in today.